Welcome to a repeat presentation of my introduction to the Modern Positivity Formula and your Positivity IQ. Today I'm going to cover much of what I've learned and written about over the past 15 years. It's going to be mostly the top line topics that will be discussed in more detail in future meetups. And hopefully, if you're like me, you spent months or years investigating many of these topics, another 60 minutes or less will turn out to be worthwhile for you. This presentation was originally given at a meetup on October 26, 2022, and this is based on what I've learned personally and from my research, and is provided only for information uh, and not intended to give any professional or medical advice. This is a copy of a report I recently bought from a noted medical school. It's really a pretty good report, covers all the basics of what we know about positive psychology, its benefits, but two things struck me in its beginning and its conclusion. First, much of what we learned today, we've been hearing from wise people across cultures and centuries. Second, the conclusion really is find something that works for you and make it a daily habit. These are the two bookends of what I'm going to present today. Much of the wisdom we need to learn has been out there for hundreds of years, but we still don't have a practical educational process in order to learn them and make them part of our basic approach to managing our thoughts. Everything has a beginning, and here's my story of how I got to my current views and the work I've done on positive psychology. This was my first encounter with the idea of perceptions of negativity, and it stayed with me for years. Way back when I was assistant manager of Captain Crunch cereals at Quaker Oats. I had some concerns I expressed about a new ad campaign. They were not well received at the time, and this is what my boss said to me. Hey, Rich, don't be so negative. You've got to be more positive. At that time, I had really no idea what he was talking about. I thought I was being uh, productive in explaining what needed to be done, but that's not how it was perceived. But I've never forgot this encounter with being considered negative rich. This is the brief addenda for today's meeting. Tell you about my original questions that drove everything I did afterwards, a little bit about myself, the types of research I did, and really the things I discovered or actually rediscovered in many cases that have been known for a long, long time, but never organized or categorized in ways that make it practical, everyday advice for how to achieve our goals based on using principles of positivity. The single focus of my presentation today in the research and writing I've done was to answer the one big question I had, which is, what does it mean to be more positive? I heard this many years ago, and certainly it's something we hear in general conversation all the time. Be more positive. You got to be positive most of the time. But as I'll demonstrate, we say it, we think we know what it means, but it's never really been defined or shown how to actually achieve this elusive goal of being more positive. I first became interested in positive thinking as a way to help me believe that I could achieve my goals. But as I've done my research, I learned that there's many other acknowledged benefits of positive attitudes and optimism, and that it helps our mental well-being, our physical well-being. People who have positive attitudes and optimism are known to live longer, healthier lives with fewer illnesses. Uh, and as you'll see, when you have a positive outlook, you see things differently. You recognize opportunities. You're more resilient and you adapt to changes. On the other hand, negativity can overwhelm us. It kills our motivation, our discipline. Even if we're looking at an opportunity right in front of us, we may see it from a negative perspective and the risks. So negativity, everybody acknowledges, it increases our fears, our doubts, our worry, our worst cases. My particular favorite, catastrophizing. So this one chart summarizes everything I've learned that I'm going to explain today. Positive thinking, positivity is a great benefit to everybody who learns to manage it, but it does not guarantee its success. I propose that it increases your probability of success. Because every day we see people achieving their goals, they talk about their success stories, and we wonder, how did they achieve it? And in fact, they often tell us exactly what they did. So we've established that positivity is one of the most important factors in a person achieving their goals. And if you're realistic about it, how do you increase the probability that you'll be one of those success stories? So the bottom line of all this is that I've created what I think is possibly the first measure or indicator of what it means to be more positive. And that is when at least 68% of your thoughts about your goal or your interest or the thing you want to achieve, when 68% of your thoughts about that subject are consistently positive, that you have sustained belief that you can achieve your goal most of the time. And in this case, most of the time is at least 68%. And this is what I am defining as your positivity IQ. Like millions of other people, I've read hundreds and hundreds of books and blogs and listened to programs and bought a few. But I also have an extensive career in all types of attitudinal and behavioral research. I've designed and managed and looked at thousands of research projects over hundreds of subjects. And I actually paid attention to what I was doing. I learned from them. But eventually, all the research had common objectives. Why do people do what they do? And how can we, in this case, businesses and marketers, change or influence attitudes and behavior? Which is exactly the same thing we want to do if we are going through the approach to how do we change our personal psychology? How do we learn to change our attitudes and behavior in a way that will help us support and achieve our goals? So after retirement, I had lots of plans. I had some new businesses I thought about starting, wanted to transform my business writing into other types of exploratory writing. But I had new challenges, new obstacles. So other people had done what I hoped to achieve. How did they do it? But as I said, I had some new obstacles and new challenges, and that's how I started getting into this whole idea of what are the secrets to success. Here's a quick visual summary of how I try to find these elusive secrets of success after I retired. I was introduced first to a book by Wayne Dyer called Manifest Your Destiny. Still have it. Lots of pages are turned down. As I delved into it, I got into the law of attraction and all the variations of you attract what you think about and you are what you think, the metaphysics, the new thought movement, everything from Napoleon Hill to Dale Carnegie to Tony Robbins to Chicken Soup for the Soul, uh, Jack Canfield. Everybody's got the same themes, but I was still looking for that singular idea that would connect with me. Read all the books, went back to manifestation, uh, tried cognitive therapy, discovered positive psychology. So over and over, lots of good advice, building on what's been known before, but something was still missing for me that enabled me to have confidence and belief in what I was being told to do with something was missing and how do I actually do it. So I decided to do for myself what I had done for hundreds of other clients over the years. Create a research project to find the so-called and elusive secrets of success that helped me achieve my goals. I've already recognized that positive thinking were one of the acknowledged fundamentals of achieving what you want. I saw other people achieving goals that I also had, often attributing their success to that belief that they could do it. So how could I translate that to myself? Here's a very brief overview of the types of research I did. I read the history of sociology, psychology, anthropology, going back over the centuries. Looked at the science, had my own personal experiences with uh, programs and psychologists. But as in all research projects, I had to have a starting plan of what I was looking for. And that basic plan was to find ideas and concepts and teachings that had persisted for centuries, consistent themes and patterns that have been observed over a long period of time. This is my body of evidence where people have said, these seem to be the cause and effect. If you are what you think, why is that the case? So that became my focal point, my research plan. Long running ideas and themes where people had made the same observations, but necessarily have come up with the conclusions I was looking for. But I had one other qualification. It had to be simple, practical, common sense that I could use every day in life. What I discovered, and in many cases just rediscovered what other people had observed before, is that since the beginning of time, there have been shrewd observers who made common sense observations about human nature and behavior. So long before there were clinical trials and statistical analysis, philosophers and teachers going back centuries have said when people think certain ways, express themselves, these often turn into outcomes that we can observe. Thus, they made the leap and the links to you are what you think and you attract what you think about without really understanding the mechanics of how that worked and more specifically, how you can learn to manage it. So this is where I picked up, building on what's already been done, but is there a next step in discovering how we can learn to manage really the only thing that's under our control, as the philosophers say, which is our thoughts. If we can only control our thoughts, how do we use it most effectively for our own purposes? Certainly, if you spend any time reading about the power of our thoughts and related topics, there's endless quotes. And that's why I said there's been consistent patterns of observations over the centuries, from Buddha to Shakespeare to Einstein. You know, everything we know is created in our thoughts. We can only change our life by changing our thoughts. Everybody made the observation, but to me, it all stops short of, okay, that's great. Now, how do I do it? How do I measure it? How will I know if I've achieved it? So this is what I read, what you've read. 3,000 years of basically the same observations. And the focus I came away with that really connected with me are the two concepts that have persisted. It's the power of our thoughts, you are what you think, and the positive thinking is a key to achieving goals. 3,000, almost 3,000 years of these observations, that leads to everything I did subsequently. Said I was looking for a consistent theme, and it had to be simple. And this was it to me. Perhaps the most widely advised but rarely explained principle of success was to be more positive. But not always that word. You could say have faith, have hope, be optimistic, persevere. There's many ways of expressing positivity, but still the answer was hard to find. What is more positive? Here's a little footnote to history. In everything I read that goes back almost 3,000 years, I never once read or was advised that the secret of success for achieving my goals or to be happier is to be more negative. Unlike so many other ancient beliefs that were eventually resolved by science, no one has ever said, you know, it's not negativity or your thoughts, just be more negative. You know, that has never appeared. So that's encouraging. There's never been any contradictory information about the nature and the ability of our thoughts, and specifically our positive thinking, to help us support what we want to achieve. I don't want to add to the confusion about positive thinking and positive thoughts. So I've come up with my own simplistic definition because in the beginning I thought positive thoughts were having happy thoughts all the time, but it was far more than that. Positivity in its broadest sense is an enabling skill so that we can handle everything else. It's your outlook, your attitudes. It embraces your confidence, your motivation, your discipline. How resilient are you? Can you deal with obstacles? Can you recognize opportunities? Can you adapt to realities? Basically, the whole idea to me of positivity is what keeps you going, but there are many subgroups and tools to use in positivity, but it's the all-encompassing definition of what do I do to keep going, to persevere, to achieve my goal. Yeah, I've now written two books. I'm working on a third one about what I've learned about how to change my way of thinking, measure my positivity, apply it to my goals. And I'll cover some more of this in detail later on, but I just wanted to introduce today just five of the lessons I learned about what it takes to understand and manage your positivity. I had to understand what kind of person I actually am. What kind of beliefs do I need? That there really was a difference between thoughts and self-talk. That we have a human negativity bias that's there. We can't overcome it. We can't stop it, but can learn to manage it. And that we have to build a positivity habit, and that's connected to our brain chemistry. I'm leading off with one concept of, do you know who you are and how you're going to apply positive thinking to your goals? Quite often we see that someone else has achieved something. We say, I want to do what they did, but I'm not that person. I came up with four categories from all the evidence and research I did. Some people just seem to be born optimistic. They're the ambitious go-getters. We see this every day. We see it, in our children. I have three daughters and five grandchildren, all with different personalities. In parentheses, I have to talk about my boss. Before I retired, my boss, the CEO of the company, uh, he achieved a lot. He didn't know as much about research as I did, or so I thought. He didn't get into the details of technology, but he achieved an awful lot. And looking back at our history together over a period of like 15 years, I realized, no, he wasn't as knowledgeable a researcher or a statistician as I was, but he was a born optimistic, ambitious person. I met a friend of his from high school who came in for some training. He said, "Oh yeah, Bill was like that in high school. He was had this natural born optimism and charm, and that helped him achieve things. So if there was a score of positivity back then, he'd have had an IQ of 1,000. But I didn't realize it at the time. Some people are fortunate they've had mentors or supporters, their mother, their father, their grandmother, their coach, their teacher. How many times have you heard a celebrity thank someone for motivating them to believe in them, to telling them they could be whatever they wanted to be? Some people just have to learn to tap into our natural positive psychology. That's why there's a huge $12 billion industry in the US just on how to achieve things, how to be successful, how to transform. Yeah, we have to learn. We all have a natural ability, but we haven't learned how to tap into it. I think we're all a combination of many of these things, but which one is the one that is most familiar and comfortable for you and most natural? And then, of course, unfortunately, there are people who will never learn or be told how to be successful. That's just a fact of life. Everything I read said you need to believe in yourself. Okay, we agree on that. But as I got deeper, I realized that there were really three types of beliefs I need that all work together. I had to have a goal that I believed in, not just wishful thinking or wouldn't it be nice, but yes, I want to be a doctor. I want to get that degree. I want to write a book. I want to start a business. I want to have a better relationship. So, do you have a goal you really believe in? Second, do you have a plan or method or program that you believe can help you succeed? I'm not a fan of magic wands that make things going to appear. So you have to have a process or a skill that you can use to help you achieve your goal. And third, of course, is the conventional wisdom and the ultimate wisdom. You have to believe in yourself, that you have the confidence that you can persevere through all obstacles. Good old Wayne Dyer had another book. You'll see it when you believe it. Play on words. When people say, well, I'll believe it when I see it. And he, among other, you know, observers said, no, you won't see it until you believe it. And here's my own simple way of how I connected the dots, especially in health and wellness, which is just a huge, huge industry, but it's overwhelmed with people who fail to achieve their goals. So I'm calling it a tale of two scales. If you're trying to lose weight, get physically fit, lower your blood pressure, there are plenty of programs and professional guidance, but my observation is You know, until you believe you can achieve your goal, you may not succeed to the extent that you'd hoped. More on this later. When I discovered positive thinking, as I mentioned, I thought it was positive thoughts. And then I learned more that it was really not just the thoughts themselves, but it's how we string those thoughts together that become our self-talk. Just highlight a book here I read not too long ago, What to Say When You Talk to Yourself. There are lots of books out there. This one had a lot of uh, accessible information, probably too many pages of saying the same thing over and over, but it had a lot of good points about the nature of our self-talk and how we manage it. Um, you can have a thought, that's great. Connect those thoughts, those words over and over again, and then that becomes the stories we tell ourselves. Here's an example from my own life. My wife and I take a walk along the lake in an area, beautiful homes overlooking the Lake Michigan. And my thought would be, oh, what a beautiful house. I'd like to live there. Simple thought anybody could have. But depending upon my mood, I could still say, what a beautiful house. I'd like to live there. But it's never going to happen. If I had invested in that business a few years ago, maybe things would have been different. That's a mistake I'll never forget. Too late now. So my thought, positive or negative, is not the ultimate influence on our emotions and our progress. It's when we turn those thoughts into the negative self-talk that we become overwhelmed with, the negativity influences on our life. So let's talk more about this self-talk. We are busy talking to ourselves every day. There's, some research out there that seems to be cited in many places, but to oversimplify, we have lots of thoughts every day. Various estimates, 40,000 to 80 thoughts a day. 70% or more are the same as the day before. 70% or more have some form of negativity or doubt or fear or uncertainty. What do we do with all this self-talk? I mean, this is who we are. We know we think. We try to think about what we think. Uh, and the evidence to date is we're thinking the same things and it's often negative. So, uh, how is that influencing us? What can we do to change it if necessary? I read in some book or blog an idea that I've expanded upon that actually every day you are writing a new book to yourself. And this person said, if you're having 70,000 thoughts a day, and if every thought was just one word, let alone more words, you are creating the equivalent of a book. A nonfiction book could be 70,000 words easily, fiction 100,000. Books I've written are more like 45,000. So every day, think about this, your thoughts amount to a book. So if that's the case, and you're applying it to yourself, what's the title of your book? Is it fiction or nonfiction? Is it going to have a happy ending or a tragic ending? And, if we're interested in positivity versus negativity, most often the book we're writing is not always the happy ending we hope for. And who are you and who else is in your book? So basically, if you're interested in the psychology of our mind, the positivity and the negativity, what story do you want to tell yourself every day? And this gets back to the concept of you are what you think, you attract what you think about, because the story you tell yourself every day may be what's guiding everything else you do and your decisions and choices and actions. So if you want to change the outcomes, you have to change the stories you tell yourself. When I first got into positive thinking, I thought the advice was I have to be more positive, which really meant I have to be positive all of the time. But as many of us have learned, humans have a uh, in our DNA negativity bias. It's our survival mechanism. That's how we knew what to do and what not to do. Going back to ancient times, prehistoric times. Everything we did in life had a risk. Most of it was out of our control. Today, we still have risks, but they're different. So we are often created by ourselves or outside forces are influencing our fears. But I like to maintain that we have more control than we think because now we understand this. We have a negativity bias. It's a necessary survival mechanism, but we can't let it overwhelm everything else we hope to achieve in life. So the good news is you don't have to be 100% positive. That is not the way humans were built. Modest negativity is still a survival tool. So you have to learn how to balance the inevitable conflicts. And as I evolved into my idea of the positivity IQ, it's recognizing that we're told to be more positive or be positive most of the time, but we don't know what that is. We don't have a target. We don't have a way of keeping track. So, in the realm of positive thinking, while there's been many advances in psychological disciplines and tools, the idea of positive thinking, I believe, has been left behind. So, I hope that my approach to the positivity IQ is a start on catching up. The last of the 5 ideas I wanted to introduce today is that you need to build a positivity habit. This is familiar territory in so many ways. You want to build a habit, you want to break a habit. Uh, Conventional wisdom is it takes 30 to 90 days to change habits. When it comes to positivity versus negativity, uh, I think we see that negativity is the almost automatic response to a lot of information and events. It triggers these thoughts. Recognizing that we are also wired for negativity, so it's natural, but it's also a learned habit. Now that science recognizes that whatever your age, we can rewire our brain. We're not stuck in the mode that they used to think was formed by the time we were, a young child. We can retrain our way of thinking. One way I like to present this is that if you can create muscle memory, you can create new self-talk memory. And that means creating a positivity habit. In this case, a habit of what is your comfortable, normal, automatic response to information. A modest amount of negative is okay, but it should be predominantly positive. And I will explore how we uh, understand it, measure it, and change it. I accepted the idea of building a positivity habit, but I was curious as to what does it actually mean? Just changing my thoughts? But again, as I was reading, and this one book here, The Science of Positivity, again was another very, brief, accessible exploration of what a positivity habit actually does. It changes our brain chemistry. Won't get into all the chemicals we know about. Cortisol and dopamine and adrenaline. But these are all things that happen in our brain chemistry, that direct our emotions and in our physiology. Uh, More recently, the science of neuroplasticity has recognized that through using repetition and exercises, you can rewire or retrain the way you think. And this has been observed since ancient times. We are now just finding ways to put the science to it. So when you become more positive, you're actually changing your physiology, your brain chemistry, that uh, this is the new comfort zone for how you react to information. You don't go overboard, you don't go into panic attacks necessarily. You know, the negatives will still be there, but your brain now recognizes that there are other tools and techniques to help you deal with whatever you're encountering. So I have all the research, all the personal experience, information that goes back, thousands of years. How does it all fit together? There were so many types of advice. There are books on every individual subject I can mention. It became just too many for me. Uh, I still wanted to find one concept that at least I could start with uh, and pursue that. And is there one fundamental idea that if I worked on it, might make all the other things more successful, which I believe I have in my approach to the positivity, personality, and IQ. So here's the very short version of what I discovered and tried to develop about this concept of being more positive. I said I look for the common denominators of what people attributed their success to. And it's clear you don't need the classic IQ to smart, the Einstein type of smart to be successful, because there's success everywhere. But you do have to be smart at something, and it might all start with positivity. So I thought maybe there's a positivity intelligence. That sort of made sense. Let me look a little further. No surprise, someone else had thought about this before. There are now recognized multiple types of intelligences. In 1983, Harvard psychologist Howard Gardner wrote a book and said, it's not just the general intelligence IQ, but there are people who are uh, extremely smart in various human types of endeavors and thinking. People who are body smart, might be your greatest athletes, music smart, logic and mathematical smarts, people smart. We see this every day. The greatest leaders, business managers, sometimes politicians, they really know people. They have that kind of smart, and that helps them achieve a goal. But my question then is there something that all these people, regardless of what their other smart was, that is underlying success everywhere, and there's one type of intelligence support the others, but has been missing? So this was part of my evidence that there was still the opportunity to find a fundamental, consistent approach, which I believed was positivity. So I refined my original objectives and hypotheses is that can you combine your personality and intelligence traits? Basically, how smart are you about your thoughts and their influence on you? So we know that the general IQ, the Einstein type, is considered to be an indicator of success. Lots of controversy about that, but it's recognized. We now know that there are other kinds of intelligence that are recognized. So is there another intelligence that is part of all types of success? Yes, I believe that it's your positivity intelligence that supports your beliefs, your goals, your abilities, and eventually achieving success. And it's time for another definition. If I'm going to talk about the positivity IQ, I need to define it. Very simply, it's a person's awareness of the nature of their positive and negative thinking and self-talk. The ability to manage that type of thinking in a way that's productive for your goals. And if you're going to manage it, you need a way to measure it. You need to have a sustained level of self-talk that is mostly positive about your subject and you can sustain it. So if you have a goal and you want to manage it, you need a way to measure it. And that led to the positivity IQ goal. Now we've started out with the core of positivity is more, but this is where I ran into my not so big surprise from my previous research. People can tell you to be more positive or be positive most of the time. They can say it, they can sort of describe it, but it's never measured. Here, going back to the old high school trick, let's look in the dictionary. The definition of more is greater, additional, to a greater degree, a greater quantity. The definition of most is the greatest in quantity, the majority, the greatest amount. So effectively, the official definitions of more is more, and the definition of most is even more. So this is not how you are able to measure your achievements in positivity. So I set out to start to solve that. Maybe one of the reasons why there's no real definition is because it's usually attached to something else that we understand. If someone tells you to drink more water, go from 1 to 6 glasses a day. Exercise more, go from 1 to 4 days a week. Most, where do you eat your pizza most of the time? The place you go more than any other. Even in psychology, uh, see your therapist more often, write in your journal more often. Even medication, increase your dosage. But when it says, Rich or anybody else, be more positive, there's no quantitative say. Do I say I'm 10% more positive? Do I say three or 10 or 20 more positive statements a day? We know what the statement means, but we don't know how to know if it's actually happening and achieved. So let's start with what we already know about intelligence and personality and the idea of more and most. And since we're talking about intelligence, here is the classic IQ distribution. And as it points out, uh, most people score near the middle of the distribution. 68% of the people are in the middle within one standard deviation of the norm. This is the classic bell-shaped curve. Uh, it doesn't actually measure your intelligence. It actually measures your scores on standardized tests compared to other people's scores. And this concept, this normal distribution, has been around for over 200 years. It's the basis of a lot of statistical analysis from quality control to forecasting. So this basic concept of what we already know about more intelligence and how it's distributed is well established. Well, if everything in the world is measured, but apparently not so much about how positive you are, uh, you know, for my own research background, it was all about I want to make a marketing plan, an advertising plan, new product development, social trends, political forecasts, and you want to achieve things or change things. And some famous management people from, 40, 50 years ago, Peter Drucker and Edward Deming, said it very well. Basically, you can't manage what you can't measure. If you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So applying that to this whole idea of positive thinking, if I knew what I was thinking and I could measure it, maybe I could find a way to manage my self-talk more effectively. So to create the positivity IQ, I wanted to build on what we already know. We know that positive thinking is recognized as an important force in, you know, our physical and mental well-being and achievements. But there are no definitions or standards for what it means to be more positive. So the next step is to create perhaps the first benchmark for defining what more and most are with regard to positivity. Everything in the modern world needs to be measured, managed, validated through science. I'm all for that. I've spent my whole life trying to find the numbers to support what it is we want to recommend. Yet, countless observers over the centuries have already told us the secret. From Buddha to Winston Churchill to Michael Jordan, you know, belief, your thoughts, positivity are what makes things possible. Uh, Bruce Lee had an interesting one. The successful warrior is the average man with laser-like focus. What I liked about this is he says the successful person is the average person, not the person who's born with the classical IQ of 200, but basically anybody with the appropriate tools and awareness has a better chance of becoming a success. And as this last person, Gwen Morton, said, if your teacher, coach, or mentor believes you can do something, you're more likely to do it. This is the anecdote we hear over and over again, and then it's been observed. So, science wants evidence, they want tests, they want sample sizes that enable them to observe cause and effect. Well, the reality is we have had the greatest research laboratory in history. 3,000 years of observations and examples of the concept of the power of our thoughts and the importance of positivity in managing those thoughts to achieve our goals. But no one says you can guarantee success. We're looking at can you increase the probability of success? So taking what we've observed, some classical measures as the classic IQ, the starting point, I believe, for measuring and managing positivity and creating this IQ approach is starting with the basic laws of probability. So just as a reminder, this is our starting point, the general intelligence IQ. It's been used for over 100 years. It's been the benchmark. It follows 68% of the scores are in the middle. So most are in the middle. Um, this is the goal you want to achieve to be, the classical smart on average. And of course, there are people above and below the average. But this is our starting point. So I'm not trying to reinvent statistics. I'm trying to adapt this universal probability to something else we already observe but want to measure, the positivity IQ. I mean, every day we talk to ourselves about lots of ideas and decisions, but we have no idea whether we are effectively positive or we are too negative. So to put it in this context, if The universal norm for many things is 68% in the middle. Perhaps our starting point is to try to get our positive thoughts because that's the context. Rich, be positive most of the time. This was as good a starting point. Actually, it was the only starting point uh, I could find that was supported by any kind of mathematical evidence, where most and more, this is where they live, in the middle. But yet we're told that most of our thoughts, maybe 70% or more each day, have some sort of negativity that then, puts a damper on our positive plans and expectations. I want to offer a little pop quiz to prove how universal this idea of the bell-shaped or normal distribution is. Some people have asked whether it's really appropriate for this idea of positivity IQ, and I say, well, at least it's a starting point. Like I said, the bell-shaped curve uh, was basically discovered, a couple hundred years ago. It's used in every facet of our lives, and if there's any mathematicians or statisticians out there. I know there's many different kinds of skewed distributions and bimodal distributions and so on, but we're talking about having a starting point for something that is connected to personality and intelligence measurement. We have benchmarks for that. So I want to use this as a starting point. And my little pop quiz is to illustrate how universal this is for our purposes. Here are two bell-shaped curves I took from other data. One is the IQ distribution. The other is the distribution of average time for pizza deliveries. Whoever does these measurements, when you order pizza, the delivery time can range from, I guess, instant, which of course doesn't happen, to never, which does. But on average, if you're going to track your pizza delivery times in minutes, what would that curve look like? So one of these is IQ, and one of them is pizza times. They look identical, right? So here they are labeled. The one on the left is the pizza delivery times. The one is the standard IQ. So what struck me in a somewhat you know anecdotal way is that we're trying to establish a benchmark for how we measure our positivity. It can be based on the standard IQ, which is well established. And my thought is like this: can't we get our level of positive thinking at least up to have a normal distribution that looks like average pizza delivery times? Aren't we at least as smart as whatever system out there that regulates and delivers pizzas? I think we can if we have the right understanding and measurement tools. So here's a summary of the Positivity IQ math. Uh, People say to be more positive or be positive most of the time. First, we're dealing with a situation where negativity is often the dominant attitude for many people most of the time. I'm saying that you can increase your probability of success by creating a new average for most goals most of the time, and that most of your thoughts about your goals should be positive, at least 68% on a sustained basis. So in this case, being average is a very good start on a level of negativity, which we already believe is the overwhelming and predominant mindset. Okay, thank you for being patient. Now you've got the history of my interests, my research approach, and some of my key findings. Next, I'd like to show you how I've turned this information into more specific measurements of positivity and an outline of applications and how to actually increase management of your positive and negative self-talk. First, I want to clear up one point that I know has come up before, which is we are not all walking around in a totally negative, funk all the time about not being able to achieve our goals. In fact, most of us have enough positivity and perseverance to survive and thrive in, a very challenging environment. But most of the people who get interested in manifestation and the law of attraction and just success formulas in general do so because they're looking to achieve a goal or change a situation, something that is beyond their normal uh, routine, something that might seem out of reach or take too long or take too many resources and that obviously causes some doubts, anxiety, frustration. So we do have and use every day positive perseverance successfully, sometimes small tasks, sometimes big challenges. But for most of us, there's always some goal out there that is beyond, our expectation, and that's when the challenges begin. I want to clarify that the whole approach to a positivity IQ or a positivity intelligence is not about a personality makeover. It's about having a technique that will help you increase your probability of success because you'll have a sustained uh, outlook, confidence, beliefs that you can use the tools available, get over and around obstacles to achieve your goal. Now, if this purpose helps you change an otherwise grumpy person into a positive, friendly person, that's great. But it's not that you need both to succeed. There's plenty of unhappy people uh, out in the world, and we've seen many in the celebrity world that achieved great success because they really believed in what they were doing, but otherwise often ended in tragedy because other aspects of their life were not under their positive control. So everything I'm presenting and trying to achieve is that when you have a goal, when there's something you want to achieve, having a sustained positive outlook is one of the fundamental techniques to help you achieve it. But don't worry, it doesn't necessarily have to mean you have to be the life of the party. I'm generalizing here, but there's lots of popular goals, and there's a book written for every one of these of how to, complete your education, how to achieve financial security, how to lose weight and live a healthy lifestyle, how to make friends and influence people, and so on. There are a lot of admirable goals. Uh, Everyone has multiple goals at different times in their life, but the essence of all these goals still comes down to what do you need to achieve them? And as I've outlined and will continue to demonstrate, there's an underlying fundamental concept of you have to believe you can achieve it, but that belief becomes from a knowledge of how you create and maintain a level of positivity that is not overwhelmed and diverted by inevitable but manageable negative thoughts and fears. As noted, there are books and blogs and podcasts for every conceivable goal. You can listen to something on YouTube. You can go to a professional for help. And yet, ultimately, they advise that you need to have faith, confidence in yourself, but they don't necessarily provide a measure to show how well your beliefs actually support your goal. Dig into the research of health and wellness programs across the board, from stress reduction, lowering your blood pressure, losing weight, changing a lifestyle. And there's tons of research on this. And across the board, various studies at various times across various populations, 50%, 75%, 95% of the people who embark on these programs, get into it, even with professional guidance, ultimately do not successfully achieve and maintain their goal. So despite all this well-developed uh, systems and protocols, if people can't achieve belief in success, there's something missing in how these programs are designed to connect with the way we actually think and live. So modern positivity is not a formula for making money, losing weight, reducing stress, or lowering your blood pressure. It's a formula to help you use other programs more successfully. A positive belief that can help support goal-specific programs. I've seen some other specifically in health and wellness and weight programs that talk about their use of cognitive psychology to help you change your belief systems and support your goals. So a positive IQ is an enabler of all the things that contribute to positivity, your focus, your motivation, your discipline, your perseverance. These are the activities that on a continuous basis increase your probability of success. So now I'll briefly take you through the materials I've developed for Modern Positivity IQ. The books I've written, there's a workbook with exercises, the fundamental tool of the scorecard, and then there's a 16-week plan in order to use these to meet that goal of building or breaking a habit over a specified period of time. And I'll use some of these materials in the future meetup discussions. My first full book on this topic was The Manifestation Formula a couple of years ago. It was more the metaphysics, closer to uh, you are what you think, law of attraction. It had the same fundamental formula of reaching 68% positivity, but it was more about the history and surrounded by the belief systems. As I did it, I learned myself that I had to go further and develop something even more practical. And that was some of the feedback I got. So the second book was Modern Positivity, which came out about 10 months ago. That was more about the research, the methods, the mechanics. I think that covers in greater detail about the fundamental structure of what is modern positivity and how it connects to a measurement system that I have and will be describing. But again, through that process and some feedback, most people still want to know, okay, that's great. What do I what do I need to know and how do I do it? And that evolved into the positivity IQ system. I'm working on that now and hope to have that ready early next year. I admit that I like programs and plans with lots of pieces and tools. Well, that's what I've done here to make it practical and usable. I've written the book, Modern Positivity. Uh, And like most people, if you read through the book, you highlight things, you turn down pages, but then it becomes a nuisance to go back and find what you were looking for and figure out how to use it. So I've taken some of the key principles and created the workbook, which is something you fill out at your own pace, but it helps you focus on answering questions, assessing your thoughts and feelings, putting down in writing what you believe or think you believe, and some suggestions for how to practice. Then there's the positivity scorecard, which I'll take you through. And uh, then I've created a 16-week plan of how to read through the book in the workbook and then implement the scorecard over a period of time. So now we're getting back to the fundamentals, the positivity thought scorecard. Remember, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So the scorecard is the primary technique that I developed to use for myself. And I kept using it pretty religiously for the first year to measure how I was thinking each week about my goals. My goal was to become a writer and assessing where I was at each point, any day, and it would change through the week. I'd be up, I'd be down. But as I will show you, once I saw that I could achieve uh, an improvement in my general outlook, it made everything else easier. In contemporary psychology, there are literally thousands of assessment forms about beliefs, happiness, confidence, you name it, there's a form. The IQ test is based on answering questions. They all have lists, they all have rating scales of many types, uh, and this is what works. We use it in business research. We need a way to uh, pose a concept or a question to a person and get a hopefully accurate and honest answer. So there are thousands out there, and really, I've adapted most of the same principles from both psychological and the commercial research I've done for many, many years. If you recall early on, I said I was looking for persistent and common patterns of observations about what contributes to success, uh, how important is positivity, but I wanted evidence that pointed to something simple, practical, that we relate to in our daily life. At the same time, we need some type of assessment of how you're thinking about your goals. So the entire positivity IQ is based on one simple rating scale about your thoughts about your goal over preferably a 1 week period. 7 statements from totally positive to totally negative. And rather than having just 0 to 10 scales or 100 to 100 scales or lots of complicated uh, statements, one thing I learned from my own research is that people can do a better job of answering and assessing if the questions themselves are posed in a way that is familiar language. I read a lot of questionnaires that might be legitimate psychological instruments, but the statements themselves are not the type of words we say to ourselves. So I created statements that reflect the kinds of things I would say to myself as self-talk. When I'm totally positive, I say, I know I will be successful and achieve my goal. At the other extreme, totally negative, I'll never be successful and won't reach my goal. Or I'll find a way to achieve my goal. These are the things we say to ourselves for some close variation, but we don't get into elaborate, uh, uh, precise statements that become difficult to interpret. There's 7 statements. Some scales have 5, some have 7, some have 10. 7 is one of the most universally recognized ways of getting enough variation without getting into trying to decide between minute differences. And these are general statements. You would fill in your own goal. I know I'll be successful and write my next book by early January. Or I'll find a way to achieve my goal of losing 10 pounds by April. So you insert your own goals, your own beliefs into these statements. And the whole goal here is to find a way of thinking about what you're thinking using words that are meaningful and comfortable to the way you talk to yourself. So I mentioned there's 7 statements. Ideally, once a week, you would think about your feelings and emotions and actions and decisions you've made, and then answer the question over the past week, how often were your thoughts totally positive, mostly positive, somewhat uncertain, and so on? And say, well, in the first week, about 5% of the time, I thought that I knew I'd be successful, but more of the time, I was only somewhat positive or uncertain. And you fill this out so that it adds up to 100%. You allocate your thoughts. The idea here is not for absolute precision, is to get some, you know, common sense look at, where were your thoughts? Mostly positive, mostly negative, or somewhere in between. And then the way you rate yourself will probably remain, you know, consistent over time, but you want to see progress in how you're changing the nature of your thinking, which I'll show you in a moment. So you fill this out for each of the 7. It's automatically totaled to 100, and it will track it over time. Now for the heart of the Positivity IQ, your scores. You fill them out on a weekly basis, and you'll get 2 scores. The total positive thoughts, and then what I'm calling the adjusted positivity score. The IQ is based on your adjusted positivity score. The reason for that is we have to accommodate what we talked about earlier, the natural human negativity bias. There's extensive research on how people perceive risks, make decisions, and we are all influenced by this negativity bias. There are books, there's a lot of academic research on this. But to oversimplify, I can have both positive thoughts and negative thoughts. In reality, as I try to put these into practice, what I'm proposing is that if I have both types of self-talk, in effect, the negatives are going to diminish or detract from your positive. For example, I can have a couple of days where I'm really up. I know I can do this. I'm going to find a way to do it. And then some down days. Well, it's not working. I'm not making any progress. Um, what's the net at the end of the week? Where did your positive and negatives net out? Was it your positives that won the week or your negatives? So I've included an adjustment factor in here based on other research I've done that says, yes, I've had a certain level of positive thinking, but I also had some negative thinking. So I'm going to subtract it. because I don't want you to get carried away with, oh boy, I'm really positive this week and everything's going to be great. No, your negative thoughts, your fears, your doubts, your uncertainty, you know, have to be managed, and they're inevitable. But they do diminish the sustainability of positive thinking. Once you get in the scorecard, it is set up for 14 periods, you know, just about 3 months. So that corresponds to, the conventional wisdom. It could take up to 90 days to break or build a habit. Um, you fill it out, all the scores are calculated, and you track it over time. And then you get to your visible progress report. As you fill out your scores each week, they are automatically updated in this chart. It shows your total positive scores in yellow and your adjusted positivity in green. The red line represents that threshold to reach the 68%. Right now, this worksheet and report, they're in Excel. It works in Google Sheets. Eventually, I'll have the resource to develop a separate app, but right now it has to works best in Excel. If anybody is interested in using the program but doesn't have access or use Excel, you can print off the worksheets, fill them out manually, and I'll be offering a service where if you send us the manually entered worksheets, say once a month, we can fill them out and send you the automated progress report. So we have a concept of positivity intelligence in the IQ. We have tools to help measure it. Now, okay, I have a target, 68%. How do I actually change my thinking? How do I rewire my brain? How do I change my brain chemistry? Well, despite thousands of years and millions of quotes, two of the simplest pieces of advice I've ever found comes from Henry Ford and Willie Nelson. You may have seen these quotes. Henry Ford said, whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. So whether you believe it or don't believe it, that's going to dictate everything else. Then Willie actually got into the methods. Once you replace negative thoughts with positive thoughts, you'll start having positive results. I'm not saying these people had any special insight from looking at 3,000 years of history, but they were both shrewd observers of how people think and acted and made decisions and reflected in their levels of success. So let's go a little deeper into this. As I've noted, there's centuries of teachings and wisdom and philosophy, and it becomes overwhelming. There are hundreds, maybe thousands of different approaches, but ultimately they come down to what I think are a few simple concepts. So I've done my best to try and consolidate them, which I'll be covering in the next book, that there are 6 lessons I learned for positivity. I'm not going to get into the details, but I have to deal with beliefs about myself. I have to understand and manage my attitudes. I have to get engaged with my ideas. It can't just be whimsical thinking and hopefully hope for the best. You have to participate in your thinking because you have to make a commitment to do the work and stick with the plan. Maybe you'll get lucky and win the lottery, but for everybody else, if you have a goal, you believe in yourself, you have ideas, you've got to commit to do the work. And then you got to connect all the elements that you have and that you're going to encounter. You got to make choices, take actions, but keep it simple. And then finally, you've got to respond to the real world. Things are not going to be as you planned. Things will change. So you have to be able to respond and be adaptable, recognize changing opportunities, and begin the process all over again. Now, those 6 categories I just showed you are nice top level looks, but then, okay, specifically, what do I have to do? What are the things I have to focus on? And one of my books, I listed several pages of what's your positivity vocabulary. I mean, there's hundreds, maybe thousands of words, but many of them are really just, synonyms for the same thing. So I boiled it down for myself, and it came down to 30 words or terms that connected with me. uh, that represent issues or ideas or needs I had at a particular point in time that I found helpful uh, in pursuing my goal of positivity towards my goals. Now, like I said, there's hundreds, maybe thousands, and from this 30, there were still two ideas that seemed to be at the top of my wisdom list, and one of them was a surprise to me. The concept of gratitude, expressing gratitude, being thankful, came up over and over again in both anecdotal, pop psychology, and academic research. Uh, Going back almost 1,000 years, Meister Eckhart said, uh, say thank you, that's enough. In modern times, Eckhart Tolle said, you know, be thankful for what you have now. There's another book I found called The Gratitude Diaries by Janice Kaplan. I thought that was a great review of all the attitudes as she talked to academics and professors and scientists about the relative importance of gratitude in our daily lives. It is now one of the most cited and medically supported benefits of positivity, that it has an emotional and physical impact. It's basically a supercharged way to help you replace negative thoughts with positive thoughts. Gratitude seems to encompass everything we experience. So this was a surprise. I thought gratitude was just saying thank you, but as if you read the book or do some more research, this is something that really captures your imagination, gets you engaged with your thoughts, and appreciates what you have, which is a big step in moving forward. The next lesson that jumped out, although it wasn't a surprise, was perseverance, persistence, stick to itness. I mean, since Confucius to Walt Disney, uh, you got to stick with your plan. Um, you know, as Walt Disney said, the difference in winning and losing is most often not quitting. So perseverance really encompasses discipline, adaptability, resilience, your confidence, and more. Uh, if you give up, obviously you're not going to succeed. And many successful people have commented on other people they've met in their life who they think this is the thing, one thing that made the difference. They kept at it, somebody else gave up. That, in effect, is a benefit to those who persevere. If you're trying to achieve something in your business life or some other competitive area, uh, realize that most people will give up before they achieve the same goal you have. So just sticking it out gives you a competitive advantage. We still need specific tools to replace negative thoughts with positive thoughts. And there's lots of conventional techniques. I've tried many of them, but not all. But these tools by themselves are not the success magic wands. They are a means to an end. You can be expressing, writing out your gratitude journals, or general journaling, meditation, mindfulness, professional counseling, visualization. You know, you need enough sleep, eat a healthy diet, uh, spirituality. There are lots of individual tools and techniques that help you achieve this idea of changing the way you think, replacing negative thoughts with positive thoughts. And like I said, these are a means to an end. These are not the tools, they're not the magic wands. So coming up to a close, I just want to give you a few practical thoughts to start a positivity plan. Following what Henry Ford says, what you have to believe, and then what Willie said, what you have to do. I've come up from all the material I presented. Like here, to me, are six essential ideas that you can incorporate in a positivity plan. And I'll take you through each one of them briefly. Yeah, there's many more. You may find different ideas that are more comfortable to the way you think, the way you make choices, the kind of goals you have. But these are overall concepts that I found I had to learn and deal with and find a solution on my own. First, I need to have realistic beliefs. I need a goal I really want. I want to have to be fairly certain about it, and I can't be changing my mind every month. Doesn't mean you can't ever change your mind, but if you don't really believe in what you want, how can you believe you'll ever achieve it? Too many people, and I've read in their stories, have said, well, I'll give it a try. That's not a commitment. you know, and sure, some people are argumentative and say, well, anything is possible. And it may be true some of the time, but not all of the time. You have to match your goals with your realistic capabilities and resources. For most of what we want, I want to get a higher education. I want to start a business. I want to get, physically fit. There are an enormous range of achievable, desirable goals that frustrate us uh, and with managing your positivity IQ, you have a great uh, leap forward in your ability to sustain that program. As I mentioned before, you don't have to be 100% positive. Negative thoughts are inevitable, often instant and simultaneous with your positive. So, as they say in mindfulness and meditation, let your thoughts flow, recognize the negatives, don't fight them, get back to your intentional positives. Just don't get frustrated by negativity. But if you learn to keep it at a manageable level, then your predominant way of thinking will eventually change your brain chemistry, the experts say, and that's what you want to achieve. So, following Willie's advice, replacing negative thoughts with positive thoughts, said there's a lot of tools out there. For one place where I went wrong in the beginning, I wanted to try them all. So I suggest find one or two tools at a time, maybe over a longer period of time, you rotate, and stick with them. It turned out I like journaling, gratitude diaries, and visualization. It's okay to experiment, but stick with as few as possible. If you make your most of your effort and most of your time buying another book and another tool, and there are many efficient, tiny time management, tiny habits, gratitude diaries, visualization, on and on and on. There's whole books and programs dedicated to one tool. Uh, this becomes your life, looking for the next best thing instead of using that next best thing to its intended purpose. Replace your negative thoughts with your positive thoughts and sustain your positivity. After all, I found one magic wand can be as good as another. Now, I've covered this over and over, but you need to measure your thoughts to know where you are, where you have to go, because you don't want to think you have to fight so hard against the inevitable negatives. Because, positive ideas, you know, we talk about we need to achieve it, but they come and they go so quickly. But at the negatives, the negative talk, that goes on, and those are the things that keep us up at night. I've never been in a situation where I was so happy and so elated that something worked out that I couldn't sleep. Have a positive thought, I can go to sleep. Have too many negative thoughts, and you're up all night. And one reason you need tools and measurements, it's just very hard to think you can think about your thinking and get things accomplished. That's why we need some kind of organized plan to help us control it. The last of this set, and perhaps the most important to me, is persistence and repetition. This is the one trait that highlights all the power of positivity to keep you going, to sustain your beliefs, and overcome your obstacles. These, this observation has been made since ancient philosophers to, everybody's favorite positivity poster child, Thomas Edison. The only way to succeed is to try just one more time. And as the positivity expert Dennis Waitley said, relentless, repetitive self talk is what changes our self image. So, what's your positivity IQ? As with all interesting things, you can always find a cartoon that somebody found to convey these complex ideas in a simple picture. Here's one that's almost perfect. I won't do it, to I will do it, to yes, I did it. I have 7 statements. This happens to have 8 steps, but the illustration is correct. Where are you in your progress? Where are you going to stop? Where are you going to finish? And one of my very favorite quotes, perhaps the most poetic of all that I've shown from Emerson, we are very near to greatness. One step and we are safe. Yeah, why not take the leap? That defines the power of positivity to sustain your beliefs, your resilience, and your persistence to keep going to achieve whatever you want in your life. So, as I started out, one of my goals in setting this meetup on positivity is to find other people to talk to about these topics, because everybody I know, uh, you know, may listen to me, but they're not always interested in talking about a topic that I enjoy. So it's a way to find people with like-minded interests. We can share experiences. Maybe there's some other common goals we can work on together, some project. And as I said, I'll be providing materials for my books to get the future discussions going. Since we cannot communicate easily by email through the Meetup platform, here's my contact information. If you have any questions, suggestions, want to get materials, you can reach me at positivityIQ68@gmail.com. I'll leave this up there for a moment. I do have a website called modernpositivity.com. It takes you up through the Modern Positivity book. It's not yet been updated to reflect the Positivity IQ, but that will be soon. Um, I've shown you my books. I'm not here to sell them, but they are available on Amazon. The Positivity Scorecard and the Plan are not on Amazon. You can't sell Excel-based programs on Amazon, so those can be purchased directly. But I'm working on let's call it a junior version that when it's ready, I can provide to people who attend the meetup at no cost just to get some experience with it, and hopefully you'll give me some feedback. So if you want to communicate, suggest, ask any questions, you can reach me, and I'm checking my email every day.